Good afternoon, everybody. How you feeling? Somebody knows. When I say fired up, you say ready to serve. Fired up? Fired up? Let's let them hear us on the hill. Fired up? It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. This is definitely a family reunion. Just such an extraordinary group of devoted changemakers. I am honored to bring greetings and gratitude on behalf of President Biden, Vice President Harris, and our entire AmeriCorps family of 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers that are getting things done for America from coast to coast. I want to thank you, Julie, for that kind introduction. I want to thank Richard for welcoming us to this beautiful library. I've had a chance to see the evolution of this space, and it is such a beautiful tribute to Dr. King and to this extraordinary city. I also want to thank Rep. Baird and Bill Basil and the entire team at the National Museum and Center for Service, and to Aquila and the entire independent sector team for bringing us together to discuss the state of service in America. It, as I said, has been great just to see so many familiar faces in the room, and also to see that, you know, this idea of our national service movement in action under one roof. I think we need to give Caleb Sy one more round of applause. We met last year when we were both panelists during the National Service Learning Conference in Tennessee, right? Where were we? What city were we in? In Franklin, Tennessee. He was still in high school at that time, but he was, you know, 60-year-old in a 17-year-old's body, and it's just so amazing to see the work that you're doing with the Youth Advisory Council, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. As Julie said, I have the joy of leading AmeriCorps, the federal agency for volunteering and national service. You know, some people outside of this room think volunteering in your community or working on a cause you care about is nice, but not necessary. But at AmeriCorps, we certainly see it differently. Over the last 30 years, by the way, we've been celebrating our 30th anniversary for 30 years. I mean, for a year. And so September 12th was the end of it, and some of us were together celebrating together of our year-long celebration. So we're now 31. So for the past 31 years, we've seen service changing lives and saving lives, and we certainly mean that literally. And these are the stories that are in our 200,000 AmeriCorps members and senior volunteers, but also the 1.3 million AmeriCorps alum and growing that not only served for a year or 2 years, but continue to make a difference in their community every day. And what I love about our AmeriCorps members is they show that service is not a pit stop, but it is a pathway. You know, I was recently in Washington State, and one of our AmeriCorps members said to me, service is no longer a tour through poverty, but it is a means out of poverty. And over again, we see how service can be totally transformational. And I think what we've seen for the past 3 decades is that any age and every age, service can transform communities and those that serve. We found that people change their own lives. We often see AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers start off serving with an education program or a food bank or a climate corps, and then just a few years later, they are running schools. They're superintendents, they're educators, they're principals, or they're running education policy organizations. They're leading food banks. They're working for a member of Congress, or they are a member of Congress, and they are passing legislation on climate and hunger and homelessness and other systemic issues. And what we see is that they are a center of our triple bottom line. 1, the transformation that happens for our communities. 2, the transformation that happens for our members that serve and they gain critical skills and accelerate economic and educational success. And 3rd, the impact for our nation that sees less social isolation, that sees more social cohesion, that sees greater civic engagement and more vibrant communities where service is at the heart of everything we do. And throughout my career, I was familiar with AmeriCorps and its mission. But when I saw AmeriCorps in action for the first time, it was actually after Hurricane Katrina.
I was working for Gene Case at the time, who was chair of President Bush's Council on Service and Civic Participation. And we were down in New Orleans and throughout Mississippi for the year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And we heard about the stories of AmeriCorps members being in harm's way, mucking and gutting houses. Long after the cameras were gone, they were still there. And I remember we would go into rooms, we would go into auditoriums like this, we'd go into cafes, and people would stand up when they saw the AmeriCorps A. They would cheer, they would cry, they were hugged, because so many people saw it as a news story. But AmeriCorps was there not only for recovery, not only for rebuilding homes, but rebuilding lives, and also for the long-term resilience for our neighbors in the Gulf Coast. And I am so proud, during our 30th anniversary, we talked about this idea that every single time America called, AmeriCorps answered. And right now we are seeing that again. Today, we have more than 200 AmeriCorps members that are responding to the devastating impacts of Hurricane Helene. I was actually just in North Carolina for the past couple days, where I met with our AmeriCorps FEMA Corps teams that are actively a part of FEMA's Coordination Center. They are in the Raleigh area. They are working on victims and survivors assistance. They are doing mapping so leaders can understand where the resources are and where they need to go. They are collecting information and passing it on so leaders know how to make decisions. And walking through that room, not only was I excited to see our FEMA Corps teams making a difference there, but I met at least 10 AmeriCorps alums from FEMA who are now working for FEMA, who are now a part of the leadership infrastructure showing this pathway from service to continuing to make a spark for the rest of their lives. And that is the work, that is the promise, and that is the possibility of AmeriCorps. Many of you know, how many AmeriCorps alum are in this room? Of course you are. When you take the AmeriCorps pledge, you say, I promise to take this commitment with me this year and beyond. And when I think about the value proposition for AmeriCorps, I am moved and motivated and inspired every single day by the incredible work that our AmeriCorps members are doing when they serve. But when I think about the value proposition, it's the and beyond. It's the folks that are going to continue to go and serving their communities in remarkable ways for many, many years to come. The other thing that I'm excited about is how service brings people together across difference, across ideology, across backgrounds, across income. Some of you might have seen the recent poll that showed that 70% of Americans agree with the statement that America has become so polarized that it can no longer solve the major issues facing the country, and that those differences will only continue to grow. That was up from 45% just in 2010, from 45% to 70%. And so I have the privilege every single day to witness this work in action, this coming together. I spend a lot of time with members of Congress. And if you spend all of your time in Washington, D.C., you might have a challenging view of the nation. And so when I'm with a member of Congress that might be having a sad day about how hard it is sometimes to get things done on the Hill, I say, come with me. I want to show you what America really looks like. I want to show you when people are mucking and gutting their house after a hurricane, when the school is down 20 teachers and they're the ones that are holding it together and tutoring and mentoring and coaching, when the food banks are overwhelmed by the lines and don't know who's going to do the work. Americans come together. They don't care what color hat you're wearing. They don't care what color your skin is. Americans still run towards the crisis, run towards their neighbors, and that's what I get to see. I think about meeting Grandma Elnora, actually when I was in Tennessee. I think the day before we met, I met Grandma Elnora. Grandma Elnora is a part of our foster grandparent program. And she told me, she said, Mr. Smith, because you're in the South, and you got to get used to that, because when someone's older than you calling you Mr. Smith, I'm like, please stop doing that. And so she said, Mr. Smith, I had one child, a son, and he was killed in gun violence when he was 19 years old. And she said, as I was approaching retirement age, I was grieving him all over again because I knew I would never be a grandparent. And she said, then I heard about the foster grandparent program. And she said, you know what, Mr. Smith? Now every single time I go to the grocery store, I can't tell you how many kids yell out to me, Grandma. That's the power of service, the life that is changing of the students that she is caring for, but the life that changed for her. I think about a recent visit to Washington, working with the Washington Vet Corps, and I met a woman named Robin who spoke about the challenging transition from military service. And she said, sometimes when you're in military service, there's a little bit of moral ambiguity. And sometimes it's hard to deal with that when you re-enter into regular service. And she said, through my service and helping other vets and helping them find their way, I was able to make sense of that moral ambiguity and find myself again. I think about a young woman that I met when I was meeting with Virginia Recovery Corps, which is an AmeriCorps program where almost every single AmeriCorps member that served has had some challenge on their own journey with recovery and substance abuse. And when I met Jasmine, she said to me, you know what? Every single door had closed to me because of my addiction. The only door that remained open for me was AmeriCorps, and then I cried. And you know, we talk about the challenges that are out there, but through the power of service, we can see how lives are transformed even while they are transforming lives. So when I look at where we are as a country right now, once again, AmeriCorps is showing how it can be that bridge over troubled waters. And I also see how service can be a pathway from charity to justice. Just like Dr. King said, whose name is on this library, that this impact shines in this room. And Dr. King reminded us of the words that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward, and it doesn't bend on its own. And while the connection between service and justice is absolute, it often can sometimes live in the shadows. And I am so glad that this room is bringing this out of the shadows. And I think about the folks throughout movements who continue to do that, and all of you are doing this work every single day. I remember before the Congressman Lewis passed away, being at a set of remarks that he gave, where he said, you know, so often people come to me and they say, Congressman, I am standing on your shoulders. And he said, do you know what I tell them? I say, get off my shoulders and get to work and get to good trouble. So I want to thank you all for being the shoulders that I can stand on. But more importantly, I want to thank you for getting off of the shoulders, for getting to work every single day and making sure that this nation, that our young people, that our seniors have the opportunity to experience the transformational power of service, that every single moment in our history has been the solution that our nation needed to solve our greatest challenges. So thank you again for who you are, for what you do, and making such a difference for our communities and our country.